The science of ascension, the fifth world, the seventh race cycle, and waves of ascension beyond 2000 AD. We're going to continue reading from the book called Voyagers. And this is where we left off last time. So let's continue. The seventh root race and their cloister will emerge upon Terra after the energetic grid of Earth and Terra reemerge. Earth's merger with Terra will mark the fulfillment of the covenant of Pallador and represent the coming of the fifth world of Native American legend. It is often referred to as Earth Ascension. It would do many of you well to realize that the term ascension represents much more than some lofty spiritual concept invented by the finite human psyche in order to give purpose to its finite existence. Many in the earthly scientific communities believe that life is limited to the physical expression and that consciousness is the result of the body's biochemical neuroelectrical functions. Following these erroneous beliefs, they draw an equally erroneous conclusion that consciousness ends at the death of the physical body. Yet, at the same time, they are unable to identify the creative intelligent force through which an ordered system such as the body could be created. Current scientific thought creates a paradox within itself as an attempt is made to define the mechanics of infinite reality within the confines of the finite three-dimensional mind. This paradox can be overcome once it is realized that consciousness and intelligence predate the manufacture of the body and transcend its finite lifespan. Once this is realized, science will be confronted with a whole new order of multidimensional reality and a whole new science through which that multidimensionality can be understood. The process of ascension is not some quasi-religious concept based upon the meaning of the human mind. Ascension is a highly scientific process of multidimensional energy mechanics that represent the universal order through which consciousness experiences itself as being. There is an order to the universe, and there are indeed natural laws of energy mechanics that govern and uphold the functioning of that universal order. Ascension represents the path of order through which consciousness evolves through a structured multi-dimensional system. In terms of planetary ascension, this process involves the transmutation of particles and antiparticles into progressively less dense states of matter, through which a planetary body is able to evolve from the lower dimensional frequency bands into the higher dimensional reality fields of the 15-dimensional scale. Ascension also involves the understanding of morphogenetic fields, or the form-holding energy constructions that allow matter and antimatter particles to build into individuated form. The process of personal ascension involves precisely the same process as the human is part of the greater morphogenetic field of the planet, and the progression of dimensional ascension of the human and the planet are intimately intertwined. Without delving into the technical mechanics of the ascension process, let us just say that planets and people evolve through the dimensional scale, through the intrinsic universal laws of energy which form and hold together the structures of consciousness that form identities in time. Spiritual ascension is not separate from these laws of energy structure, for consciousness is sentient energy and must therefore abide by the natural energetic laws which hold universal structure in order. Ascension is a science with specific mechanics that allow for the evolution of consciousness from simple to more complex forms. In the highest states of evolution, identity evolves into the highest dimensional fields, and then beyond, moving from simple forms of biology or moving from simple forms of biological expression into the more complex structures of pure conscious identity. Every being in existence is involved in this evolutionary process, and so the dynamics of the science of ascension apply directly to each and every one of you. If you can realize the significance of this science, your evolution will occur much more rapidly and with less effort, for you will learn to work with the natural laws of energetic structure to which your consciousness is bound, instead of working against these mechanics because your consciousness has yet to comprehend the forces through which it manifests. The evolution of planet Earth is intimately connected. It's intimately connected to that of the planet Terra, which is the original planetary mass out of which Earth emerged. This means that the morphogenetic field of Earth was originally part of the morphogenetic field of Terra, and both were part of Gaia's morphogenetic field. In order for an energy structure to fully ascend through the 15-dimensional scale, it must assemble all portions of its original morphogenetic imprint. The morphogenetic fields exist as tapestries of interwoven energy particles composed of literal substance, and so the process of assembling morphogenetic fields into their original pattern is the process of recombining the portions of this energetic tapestry that have become separated from the original back into the original form of energy tapestry, or energetic tapestry. Planetary ascension is the reuniting of energy units that had been separated into various dimensional frequency bands, pulling those energy particles back together by merging the frequencies within which the particles reside. There are natural energy dynamics that govern the merger of multidimensional frequency bands, part of which involves particles and antiparticles merging. Particles and antiparticles are composed of units of multidimensional sound or tones, and within each frequency band there are bass tones and overtones. The process of merging particles and antiparticles in order to create the merging of frequency patterns is the process of bringing together bass tones and overtones that emerge out of the same morphogenetic field. When bass tone and overtones merge, a resonant tone is created, through which particle and antiparticles merge and transmute into pure energy. They return to the morphogenetic field, carrying with them the new frequency pattern they picked up from the unified field of the dimension in which they appeared, which in turn expands and adds energy to the original morphogenetic field. When the particles and antiparticles are next expressed into manifestation, they will appear within the next frequency band up, as their rate of vibration was increased by adding the frequency patterns from the dimension they just left. It is through this process of building dimensional frequencies into the morphogenetic field, through the merging of particles and antiparticles, that matter forms evolve up through the dimensional scale. Terra and Earth will merge through this process as Earth moves upward into the dimensional frequency bands in which Terra's matter body is positioned. When the frequency bands of Earth and Terra merge, changes will take place within the matter body of Earth. New land masses will begin to rise in the oceans, new waters will emerge in places where they were not, but this process does not take place all at once. Planetary ascension takes millions or billions of years. Planetary ascension takes place in waves. All planets evolve within cycles of time, designated by the dimensional bands in which they appear. At certain points in these dimensional time frequencies, time cycles, the frequency bands of one dimension blend into the one above and below, which allows matter and antimatter particles to merge, transmute, and re-manifest within the dimensional bands above and below. The particles and antiparticles that will be able to shift upward out of their home dimensional bands are those that have fully assembled the frequency patterns within their home dimension. During this point in time, during this point in a time cycle, the energetic tapestry or grid of the matter-particle planet passes through the grid of its antiparticle double from the parallel universe. And through this energy fusion, certain portions of those energetic grids transmute, sending a morphogenetic wave into the dimensional band above. The morphogenetic wave then projects its particle and antiparticle form into manifestation within the new dimension and its inherent time cycle. The portions of the particles and antiparticles that had not fully assembled all of the frequency patterns from their home dimension will not be able to merge and will thus manifest from the morphogenetic field back into their home dimension to continue their evolution through assembling the remaining frequency bands of that dimension. The morphogenetic field of a person exists as part of the larger morphogenetic field of the planet, and so when a planet approaches the dimensional blending point in its time cycle, the people on the planet also reach that point. People's bodies and consciousness are composed of energy particles, and when the planet approaches transition and transmutation of some of its particles, people on the planet will also undergo this particle transmutation. Just as only portions of the planet's particles will be able to transmute and ascend into the next dimension through the morphogenetic wave, only portions of the human population will be able to transmute and ride with the planet on that wave of ascension. People who have fully assembled the third and fourth dimensional frequencies into their DNA, and in parentheses it says fully assembled the dimensional frequencies into their third and fourth DNA strand, will be able to ride that wave of ascension back into Terra's energetic tapestry, which perpetually constitutes a leap in time. The personal morphogenetic field and consciousness will be carried within the planet's morphogenetic wave, which will merge with Terra's fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional particle and antiparticle structure. The matter particles of the portion of Earth and its people that were carried in the morphogenetic wave will then remanifest out of the morphogenetic field into the second harmonic universe frequency bands, in parentheses dimensions 4, 5, and 6. These Voyagers will find themselves in a new time cycle upon a future version of Earth Terra, whereas the people who did not catch the morphogenetic wave will continue on in their own first harmonic universe time cycle, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. This kind of sounds like a timeline split. There's a lot of people that talk about, timeline splits and all this stuff. I mean, this kind of sounds like it. For many people, there will not be enough time between now and the height of the ascension wave of 2012 through 2022 AD to completely assemble the necessary frequency patterns of their DNA. So remember, this book was written in, 2003? So that it was claiming some kind of one of these dimensional shifts was going to happen between these years. Well, it's already past these years. So I'm reading this in 2025. So I mean, is there any way to prove that this shift happened and some people are now on this new timeline? I mean, how do you really tell? Can't really prove it or disprove it. All right, let's continue. So it says to completely assemble the necessary frequency patterns into their DNA, which means they would end up remaining in the present time cycle and having to reincarnate into that cycle to continue the evolution. Many of these souls will choose to leave their bodies at this time so their consciousness can assemble the needed frequencies in time to catch the ascension wave. The soul, not the personality, will make this decision. Only natural, soul-orchestrated death transition will allow for the consciousness to ascend. Suicide will not assist in this process because if the soul is not ready to leave its manifest body, the death transition will occur naturally or through soul-arranged events and not at the hands of an unawakened personality. We heartily request to those who may be thinking along such lines, do not use suicide as an attempt to release yourself from the body, for this can actually stop the ascension process. If the body cannot transmute, but the soul essence is ready to ride the ascension wave, the soul awareness will arrange for the appropriate death scenario. The soul uses the body as a means of assembling frequency patterns into the consciousness. And if the body is released prematurely, the consciousness of the individual may not have reached a high enough level to catch the ascension wave. The body helps the consciousness evolve to higher frequencies, and only the greater soul identity knows when the consciousness has reached a high enough level to ascend properly. Taking matters into the hands of the personality, such as is the case in suicide, usually botches the soul's ascension plan, and during the coming ascension wave, it is very important that the personality allow the soul to direct its ascension process. Under no circumstances do we endorse suicide as a way of making this transition. If you are still in a body, then that is where your greater soul identity wants you to be in order to best facilitate your evolutionary process. The ascension wave offers the souls of Earth the opportunity to reach their next level of evolution. This evolutionary fulfillment of Earth was foretold in ancient stories as the return to the Garden of Eden or man's ascension to heaven. The return to the Garden of Eden, that doesn't really that doesn't really hold a lot of congruence with the translators that translate the cuneiform and the Hebrew stuff, like Mauro Biglino about the Garden of Eden. That was, that's been pretty well researched and translated now, referring to the time when some of these Anunnaki gods and these Elohim gods were doing the genetic experiments on the humans. So it's like, why a return to that? Because that's when they first started doing that, according to a lot of these translators, the human Homo sapiens were at an extremely low level of consciousness, and then that was like when they got some of these consciousness upgrades and also some of the genetic upgrades that were done to them by the Anunnaki. So, to return to the Garden of Eden, that would be like going backwards. All right, let's keep reading. The seventh ray cycle will occur upon Terra many years in the future. Presently, the sixth ray cycle is just beginning with the third wave of the Melchizedek cloister birthing onto the planet. This cycle presents the transitional race, the transitional race cycle, as Earth begins to merge with Terra. This transitional cycle and the civilizations that will be built through it represent the fifth, or the coming fifth world prophesized in Native American legend. For over 1 million years, all of your spiritual traditions have, in some way or another, attempted to prepare you for this point within Earth's time cycle. In the fifth world, the 6 races will evolve, followed by the 7th races, and through this evolution you will transcend the mechanics of death, disease, and aging and rediscover the reality of the immortal body and a fully conscious connection to God. I think when they say God here, I don't believe they're referring to like the Anunnaki gods or anything. This was more like a reference to just the conscious, intelligent energy of the universe. Because remember, there was a lot of fake gods, a lot of aliens with the technology masquerading around as gods. That was the Anunnaki, the Elohim, Yahweh, and Lil Zeus, Enki, Thoth, etc. None of those deities are real, like the god creators of the entire universe. The seventh ray cycle will assemble DNA strand 6 and open the potential of ascension to Gaia, which is Earth Terra's harmonic universe 3 counterpart. Following the Terran cycles, period. Okay, the cloister of the seventh race is the Unaceti, and they carry the full 12-strand DNA package of the Turanusium lineage in operational form. The seventh root race is the Eunjeki. That's a hard one. Eunjeki, often called the Paradisians. The Paradisians. They carry the DNA strands 1 through 5 and the base codes for 6 through 12. Members of the seventh race cycle do not experience death, nor do they breed through physical means, but rather through replication of combined energy fields. They do not carry exaggerated physical gender distinction, but are rather primarily androgynous soul-awakened identities. Their bodies are composed of less dense matter particles, and so they are not as strongly bound by gravity, which allows for mobility far beyond that of your present bodies. They can travel through time, and often do, such as when they visit your system. Many of your extraterrestrial visitors are actually your seventh race relatives from Terra. Not all visitors are direct relatives to the humans. They represent the races of which you will one day evolve to become members when you walk the beautiful lands of Terra and Gaia. The seventh race, or the seventh races, mark the fulfillment of the human evolutionary imprint and a return to the glorious beings you all once were before your fall into Harmonic Universe 1. Evolution beyond this stage will take you into the realms of pure consciousness or pure conscious being and into the quote-unquote God worlds where entities play. You are the Voyagers and have always been. It is time to awaken to the reality of your journey, and now we will return you to the times of the second seeding, 3.7 million through a million years ago through 848,000 years ago, when your present fourth world began as the reseeding of races 3 through 5 was orchestrated through the Syrian human hybrid race Dagos. Through understanding this history, you will discover the truth of the Ark of the Covenant, a well-kept secret that will directly impact the course of your evolution over the next 30 years. The 1,000 Years' War. The second seeding, the Dracon and Dracos, the Anunnaki, and the Nephilim, the Elohim, Ceres, and the Egyptians, the return of the Sphere of Amente, and the 1,000 Years' War, 3.7 million years ago through 848,000 years ago. Great Hope lived within the promise of the fifth root race Aryans and their Hybiru cloister of the second seeding, for they held within their morphogenetic field and DNA imprint the frequency patterns of the fourth dimensions. The Elohim of Harmonic Universe 3 paid special favor to these races and assisted a few select families whose codes were not contaminated by mixed breeding. The Elohim assisted these families in releasing the seal of Palidor within their genetic codes by transplanting their energetic bodies into Elohim morphogenetic fields. The Elohim hoped that by the accelerated evolution of these chosen groups, the vibration rate of Earth's grid could accelerate more rapidly so the sphere of Amente could be returned to Earth's core and the seal of Palidor lifted from all the races of the second seeding. If 8% of the races could assemble the fourth DNA strand and increase the vibration rate particle pulsation rate of their personal bodies and bioenergetic fields, the particles of the Earth's grids would also accelerate to Dimension 4 frequencies high enough to hold the sphere of Amente with its fourth dimensional frequency coding. Once the sphere of Amente was returned to Earth's core, the souls of the second seeding races could return to their morphogenetic fields upon death and would no longer suffer the fragmentation of consciousness into the Dimension 4 astral and Dimension 2 elemental kingdoms. With the return of the sphere morphogenetic field in the memory of the races would be re-entered into Earth's grid, and the strand particles of DNA that brought that memory imprint into the personal cellular memory would reassemble within the operational DNA strands of the entire fifth race, returning to the incarnates the memory of their place and purpose within the evolutionary drama. Opening the sphere of Amente within the Earth's core would automatically accelerate the process of building DNA strands and incarnational evolution for all the races, and for those who completed assembly of the fourth strand, the seal of Amente would be released, allowing for ascension to Terra through the halls of Amente. The Lemanians and Urantrians and Brianoa and the Aryans and Hyberu of the second seeding evolved on Earth together 3.7 to 1 million years ago. Approximately 1 million years ago, the race called the Dracon from Harmonic Universe 1 Orion star system came to Earth and tampered with the genetic codes of the races. Okay, I think that might be the potentially the part of the Genesis. And then I think that's the races that also built the pyramid systems, because all the pyramids are aligned with the Orion star system. What do you think? They created hybrids within the root races called the Dracos, contaminating the human genetic code and altering the evolutionary imprint for numbers of the Amente souls. The Dracon race is a sentient, intelligent race of upright standing, dragon lizard-like beings with a tendency toward aggression and warlike behavior. Okay, as we're probably referring to the reptilians that people always talk about, the shape-shifting reptilians, I think. They represent a digressive strain of a superior reptile-like race from the Harmonic Universe 3, or from Harmonic Universe 3, and frequently had poor relations with the Harmonic Universe 1 Galactic Council. They were expert geneticists and scientists, but showed little regard for other life forms and lacked spiritual development. The Dracos hybrids were more lizard-like in appearance, with body structure more closely resembling humans, but facial features and temperaments characteristic to the Dracon. The Dracon also tampered with certain strains of Earth dinosaurs who were seeded on Earth about 375 million years ago as an experiment by other ET races, creating aggressive carnivorous monitors for their captive human populations. Many of the cultures of the second seeding abandoned their advanced surface cultures and retreated underground to escape the terror of the Dracon monitors. The monitors are like giant lizards. And you can still see some of them They're not. They're I think in like the Philippines or Thailand or over there in around that area. They're these giant monitor lizards, and they're so big that like people keep them as pets, but they're so big like they eat baby goats. Like they'll just swallow a baby goat all at once. Like the same way you'd feed like a giant pet lizard or a pet snake. You'd feed them like a little mouse, and they just swallow the whole thing. The monitored lizards, they'd swallow baby goats. The falzants, in parentheses, chupacabras, were also created at this time, combining certain animal strains from the Dracon planets with various Earth animals. The falzants and the descendants of the Dracos are presently assisting Zeta visitors with earthly agendas detrimental to the human populace. Now, I've always said like everything on this world was like seeded or a genetic experiment from something. Like nothing just happens by chance or by accident, in my opinion. These intrusive visitors of Draco's lineage are in reality a hybrid mutation of our human ancestors who evolved with the Orion star system. As they are members of the human lineage, they feel entitled to use the territories of Earth, even though their race was banned from here nearly 850,000 years ago by the Brino, I think is how you pronounce that. Like most Syrian Anunnaki strains, the Dracos also carried the genetic configuration of the 666 Templar Axion seal previously discussed. The soul essence of the Dracos is part human and part Dracon. The Dracon and their creations became a menace to the developing races, and so plans were orchestrated to dispose of the Dracon problem. About 956,500 years ago, with the assistance of the Anunnaki visitors from Sirius A, the races jointly employed a plan of using the power within the Earth's grid to destroy the underground habitats of the Dracon and their monitors. The plan backfired, creating an explosion within the Earth's crust, which created climatic anomalies, flooding, a slight pole tilt, the destruction of part of land masses, and finally a small period of global ice that ended about 950,000 years ago. Most of the Dracon left Earth during this period or were destroyed by climatic conditions. Most of the human races retreated underground, creating sophisticated cultures beneath the Earth's crust. Some races being permitted to enter the portals of the inner Earth. Once environmental conditions stabilized, many races returned to the surface, rebuilding their civilizations. Though most of the Dracon had vacated or perished, they left a legacy of genetic distortion behind them that threatened the continuation of the human lineage. Earth animal interbreeding became a problem as the races of the second seeding and host matrix transplants, and this is C Voyagers 1, were being used to realign the human genetic codes. The races of Amente began to digress further due to Dracon contamination of the genetic lines, and several other ET races used this opportunity to experiment with the human evolutionary imprint. Some of the more primitive human-like forms of early man arose from such experiments, as did some of the ape-like human variants. But the human lineage did not originate from these primitive forms. These forms emerged from the distorted human imprint. Many such mutations were also created prior to the Electric Wars. The Lemanian and Atlanian cultures fragmented, became fractions, and began warring. The Atlanians of the second seeding were influenced by descendants of the Syrian Anunnaki race from Harmonic Universe 2, which later evolved for a time on Harmonic Universe 1 planet Mars, the same race that had instigated the Terran Templar Solar Initiates rebellion against the Syrian Council, which culminated in the Cataclysm of Terra. The Elanian civilization began to systematically disregard the Law of One. The Anunnaki brought to Earth Atlantia, the creed of the Templar Solar Initiates from Terra, an elitist, materialistic distortion of the principles of the Law of One, which had created the cataclysm of Terra. The Anunnaki added their own sexist slant to these teachings, so women would be viewed as subservient to men and therefore able to be used as breeders of hybrid children. This teaching was a tactic to socially disempower women so they would have little support to reject the sexual advances of the Anunnaki males. The Anunnaki created teachings that made them appear to be the gods of the human race, and though these teachings were easily able to manipulate the Atlantean cultures into cooperative submission. That's exactly what I've been saying right here for like many, many years. I've been saying this. This is where all the religions came from right here. The Anunnaki gods created the teachings that made them appear to be the gods of the human race. And that's where you get every religion on this earth world, in my opinion. It's also where you get a lot of this monotheism and patriarchy nonsense. The Anunnaki proceeded to bring forth the race of human Atlantean Anunnaki children who were called the Nephilim, who entered the Earth system about 950,000 years ago. Having more developed genetic codes via their Anunnaki fathers, the Nephilim quickly dominated the less developed humans, creating a highly advanced materialistic culture built upon exploitation of less evolved life forms. That's exactly also what it talks about in that other book I read called The Apocalypse of Yajnavalkya. See, he was saying that it was these Nephilim, that the Nephilim bloodlines that are still ruling over everyone, and all their systems of enslavement that they've implemented. That's what it's talking about right here. About how they would dominate the less developed humans. They did that with the banking system, the education system, the mainstream media system, the legal systems, the religious systems, the big pharma systems, big agricultural systems, everything. They created all those systems that we use. Many genetic experiments were carried out, creating varieties of animal humans, terribly distorting the human genetic imprint. Lemanian culture was not affected as greatly by the Anunnaki infiltration, as many members of this race retreated into the underground, becoming involved with the priests of Mu, who guarded the portals of the inner earth. The Terran priests of Mu commissioned many of their immortal members as guardians of the inner earth since the beginning of the Turanusium II experiments. Around this time, 950,000 years ago, the Elohim and Ra Confederacy orchestrated massive host matrix transplants, removing the distorted Nephilim racial strains from their connection to the Amente morphogenetic field and splicing them into the morphogenetic fields of other entities from Harmonic Universe 3, 4, and 5. The transplants were conducted in order to prevent the human morphogenetic field from becoming contaminated by the Anunnaki and Dracon genetic lines, which would have taken human evolution in a completely different direction. In order to orchestrate the transplants, certain frequency patterns within the DNA were dismantled but left within the cells, and in parentheses it says contemporary quote-unquote junk DNA. So the souls evolved, the souls evolved could eventually plug in the frequency codes and re-evolve into the Amente morphogenetic field once their code distortion were corrected. The humans involved in the transplants, who were already genetically altered by the seals of Amente and Pallador, now had even more genetic distortion to repair, but without the transplants they would never have fulfilled the human evolutionary imprint to ascend. During the second seeding, the Elohim motivated the Harmonic Universe 2 series race, descendants of the Harmonic Universe 2 series, and that series with a C, not with S, to assist in realigning the genetic imprint of the earthly race strains and the series energetically interbred with certain members of the Atlantean and Aryan races, creating a superior guardian race called the Ceres, who later became known as the Egyptians. The Egyptians were originally one of the 7 subraces with the Atlantean root race. The original morphogenetic field for this subrace became distorted through Anunnaki interbreeding of the Nephilim, at which time the Elohim and others removed the distorted portions of the Egyptian morphogenetic field from the sphere of Amentet, placing this portion of the race under the care of the host matrix family from the rock confederacy called the Aton A. The portions of the Egyptian subrace that remained in the Amentet morphogenetic field were fused with the morphogenetic field provided by the Harmonic Universe 2 series, which created a hybrid Egyptian race called the Sirius, who became the pharaonic line within Egyptian culture. The Sirius Egyptians began a new line of Egyptian bearing an advanced genetic strain. Later, during the third seeding, the Egyptians carrying Syrian Anunnaki Nephilim morphogenetic fields were mixed with the Sirius Egyptians, so the morphogenetic field of the Syrian Egyptians could be integrated into the sphere of Amentet. Descendants of the Sirius Egyptian held the line of Egyptian royalty throughout the early dynasties, but eventually the Syrian Egyptians were integrated into this line, and for a time, open relationships with the Syrian Anunnaki and Syrian Blue races resumed. The Egyptians carried a specialized genetic code because of this early morphogenetic manipulation. During the third seeding, this imprint became even more specialized as portions of the Egyptian line were adopted by the sixth race cloister Melchizedeks, who served as a host matrix family to realign an overdevelopment of Anunnaki genetic coding. All of the human races to walk the planet, of all the human races to walk the planet, the Egyptians carried the most diversified genetic code. The Melchizedek Egyptians of the third seeding orchestrated the Atonist movement about 3,000 years ago in order to redirect Egyptian culture back towards practice of the Law of One, teachings that had fallen into digression through Anunnaki involvement with Egyptian culture. The Sirius were created during the second seeding about 945,000 years ago, their Atlantean subrace morphogenetic field being merged with the Brianoa and Hybiru cloisters of the fourth and fifth races, which brought the Aryan and Hybiru lineage into the Atlantean Egyptian line. This realigned and advanced the genetic blueprint for the Egyptian subrace, creating what would become the primary Egyptian lineage through the third seeding. After a period of development, the human evolutionary imprint began to prosper. About 900,000 years ago, the Elohim and the Syrian Council, Sirius and Peladorians of Harmonic Universe 2, re-entered the sphere of Amentet into the Earth's core. At this time, Syrian Anunnaki from Harmonic Universe 1 and Harmonic Universe 2, along with Dracon and other sympathizers, decided to take human evolution in another direction. Still angered over Elohim interference with their Nephilim race, the Anunnaki from Sirius A devised a plan to destroy the sphere of Amentet and utilize the Earth's humans as a worker race to harvest Earth gold for Anunnaki purposes. The Anunnaki of Sirius A needed gold to replenish depleting elements within their planetary atmosphere. Okay, we're all familiar with that narrative about the Anunnaki and needing to come here for gold and doing the genetic experiments. Wars broke out. Wars broke out between the early Nephilim and their Sirius, which escalated about 850,000 years ago into a great intergalactic war between the Elohim and the Anunnaki, each fighting for control over Earth territory and the evolutionary direction of the human lineage. Well, it seems like these wars are still going on today, people battling over different Earth territory. I mean, just look at all the wars in the Middle East with America, the American military war machine, just taking trillions of people's tax dollars to finance all these wars in the Middle East. It's still going on. This war became known as the 1,000 Years' War. It has lasted approximately 1,200 years. And over here, this is saying this one was 850,000 to 848,000 years ago. We're still seeing it go on right now in the present. Most of the Earth races sought exile in other planetary systems. Some retreated to the inner earth, and most of the Nephilim were relocated to Sirius A and later to the planet Nibiru. The few races remaining on the surface were destroyed by the ravages of a high-tech war. Again, the Brino of Harmonic Universe 5 had to intervene, and about 848,800 years ago, they assisted the Elohim and the Syrian Anunnaki to negotiate a treaty through which both the Anunnaki and Elohim would assist in the third seeding of the human lineage. Okay, and the next part here is called the Treaty of El Anu, the Anu Melchizedeks, and the Anunnaki resistance, and the Templar Axion seal.